It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson, and as always, with me is my co-host, Andy Grabner. Hello, Andy.
Ooh, I'm here.
Yay.
How are you?
Good. You know, I just flew back from vacation last night, and boy, are my arms tired.
Why? From flying? You have why? Did you
It's
fly?
a bad joke.
It's a bad joke. It is a bad joke.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was at, I was thinking from a performance point of view, right? So we went to Universal Studios in Orlando, and we went on this roller coaster called the Rocket. And two things I was thinking of testing and performance on the Rocket. At one point, you know, it rains a lot in Florida in July or June. So I'm getting ahead of the summer already. It rains a lot in June. And they had shut the roller coaster down, and when they started it back up, they ran about, I'd say, 12 to 15 test cars doing all the little different telemetries, and I guess they had all these different sensors everywhere, collecting all the feedback, and all I kept on thinking was like, there's all these feedback loops, and they're collecting the telemetry to see what's going on. This is just like a really well-monitored system. Mm-hmm. But then the other cool thing they do is on this, and I implore anybody who likes roller coasters, if you're ever down there, go on the Rocket. You get to pick which music you want. So you have like speakers right by your head. And the other thing I was thinking from a testing point of view is like almost every song they had, I think, works really well with the roller coaster because you go up flat up on your back, like you go up horizontal up the hill, and then you crest over and go down this really big hill. And the first time I went on, I picked I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor because I was thinking I'm going to die. So I thought that was perfect because at first I was afraid, I was petrified. I'm like, this is perfect. And then the second one was some Motley Crue with like some fast, heavy guitars. I'm like, this is rocking, yeah. So I was thinking somebody probably had to go test the songs they're using to make sure that they fit with the roller coaster. User acceptance, right? So anyway, I just had to tie that in to be able to justify all the business expenses I did on my family vacation.
Well, it still doesn't explain why your arms hurt, but maybe we get to this later.
Because I flew, like a bird. Come
Correct.
on.
So I guess people, as much as they're interested in hearing about your vacation, I'm being jealous that you were in Universal Studios. Today is actually, so you had like little cars, like little components on your roller coaster. It's like kind of like small little microservices that work in perfect orchestration to give a perfect user experience, right? Isn't that kind of what it is?
Exactly.
And do you know what? I think we invited the perfect guests for the show today to actually talk about microservices, lessons learned, and a lot of other things. And I think it's really...
Who would that be?
Who would that be? I don't know. Let's see. I think we already hear her giggling in the background. So without further ado... Susanne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Susanne. I'm from Hamburg, Germany, and I also have a little story about a roller coaster at Universal Studios a long time ago. And I was doing driving the roller coaster with a sunburn at my back, and was such a pain. So that's the reason why I really can remember this. But unfortunately, it was not such nice memories.
Yeah, sunburn ruins everything.
I do hope that you also have positive memories about Universal.
I also had positive memories, yes.
That's cute. All right. So, Susanne, I know you just said, you're from Hamburg, Germany, and I'm pretty sure you get a lot of jokes about Hamburg and hamburger, or I'm not even sure. Are there jokes about Hamburg and hamburgers or not?
Not from Germans, to be honest. Okay. But yeah, usually from people from the US, especially.
You can say stupid Americans. That's okay.
No, I'm not going to say that.
I will.
But sometimes like you are a hamburger, giggle, and then yes, you are right. I am a hamburger. Like you can't eat me.
Here's a joke for people familiar with the old McDonald's characters. And I'm just making this up now, so I can't tell you if it's going to be good. But preamble, my jokes are really terrible. So way back in the old days, McDonald's had characters, Ronald McDonald and Mayor McCheese. So my joke is, what do you call a thief in Hamburg? The Hamburglar. Because that was one of the characters. That was, awesome, right?
Yeah.
Stupid Americans. All right, go on.
All
sorry.
right. So, Susanne, we actually didn't meet in your hometown, neither in my hometown, but we actually met in Iași, city on the eastern border or the eastern side of Romania. We both spoke at a conference, Dev Experience, and you spoke. I think your talk was titled "Microservices Lessons Learned," and I found it fascinating. So I actually reached out to you and said, "Hey, let's do a podcast because it's really interesting the way you explain how you approach microservices projects, and there's a lot of cool lessons learned." And then just I think a week or two ago, as we got kind of closer to the recording, you said, "Well, there is maybe another presentation, and it's about Wardley Maps, and it's about again microservice journeys." And I said, "Well, let's have a look at this." And I thought, wow, this is even cooler stuff. So I think there's a lot of stuff we can talk about. I do want to get started though with a question to you, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. But I see a lot of, especially enterprise companies, being very excited about breaking the monoliths, moving to microservice architectures, because they all feel the promise of microservices is so great of delivering faster with better quality, delivering value to the end users, just in a more modern way, a sustainable way to beat the competition. Now, I want to start though with asking you, is there any advice from your end before starting a project when people try to figure out, are microservices the right thing for us to do? Is there any advice on key, let's say, things to look at to figure out, is it actually a good and smart idea, either for the particular software project, the application, the service, or maybe for the organization to say, yes, we should go down the microservice lane, or no, it doesn't make sense for us?
Yeah, so usually there are some criteria that I would like to tell everyone when they try to consider going the path from monoliths to microservices. And the thing is, one of the criteria is, are you really benefiting from microservices after we have extracted those? And so to split your monoliths just for the sake of having smaller pieces, I guess it's not the right angle or the right perspective to have. So at the very beginning, you should ask yourself, what am I expecting from having a microservices architecture style in terms of, can I, for example, after I've extracted some services, can I deliver features faster? So, and do I have some service candidates that require a lot of changes, for example, that require a lot of new features to be delivered? Or for another criteria could also be, after I've extracted a service, does it allow me to scale more efficiently than before? Or another aspect criteria could be, does it allow me to shift ownerships within my team so that the impact across the teams is smaller than before, that the teams can work independently from each other and can develop and deploy their services independently from each other and with minimal impact across the team, so that in the end they can deploy their services and deliver new features faster to the customers. So at the end, the core question is, can I deliver features that matter to my customers faster with microservices? And sometimes people are mostly have a blind spot. They just want to cut it into pieces and just for the sake of, okay, microservices now, that's something that we have to do right now. But if you're a small team and you always deploy your product, for example, on premise as one artifact, because that's one requirement or that's one user need, then probably it makes not such a good sense, or it's not that big of advantage that usually microservices will give you. So, for example, if you always, for example, have one big web archive that you have to deliver on services, then, well, why have you split it up beforehand, just only to deal with all the infrastructure and operational complexities that come with microservices? Then you could have kept it, if you would have kept it in one piece because you're always deploying it in one piece to your customers, then I would recommend that probably a monolith would be better. It depends on different aspects. So it's not only the deployment artifact that you deliver, but also does it allow to scale your organization? So if you're only 2 people working on one product, probably it's not that beneficial for you to go the microservices way. So there are different aspects that you might consider but the core principle is, does it allow you to deliver features faster, features that matter to your customers? Mm-hmm. That's what I would usually answer to that question.
Yeah, I especially, I think, I'm not sure if I ever heard people name one of the benefits you just named, which means shifting the ownership. If you have large teams, and then you have a big code block, and you have a large team responsible for it. I think breaking it up to just quote unquote free people from the ownership of something they shouldn't own, I think is an interesting aspect. But you're right. You should always ask yourself the question: does it really make sense? And what's the real benefit from microservice to your organization? Now, obviously, you're not just talking about this because do you like to talk about this topic with? I'm sure you do, but you actually have a lot of experience on this too. If I look at your bio, and if I remember some of the discussions we had, you were actually going yourself through one of these transformations, correct? Where you migrated mm-hmm. from a monolith to a SaaS solution where you needed microservices. Can you kind of reflect back then from your own story on what drove you to breaking up the monolith and kind of what you did and how you got started?
Yes, so in fact, we were growing in every aspect. So in the very beginning, we had a monolith in every aspect. We had one team working on one collaboration product that was shipped as one archive or one artifact to the customers. And so everything was growing after a while. So the team was growing. We added more and more features to our product, and the source code got bigger and bigger. But after a while, we were confronted with some downsides of it. So, for example, one thing was also the ownership that you were mentioning before, is that no one really felt responsible for something. So, for a specific part of the software. So that as a consequence was that, for example, when a bug arose, it took a little longer than it's supposed to take because no one felt really responsible for the specific bug, or that discussions, meetings, decisions took longer than before. So our processes were slowing down, and also because we were constantly adding new features, we were increasingly confusing our customers, because sometimes you had buttons to upload documents. For example, it's a collaboration app where you also can manage or share documents between your team members. And the customer themselves got a little confused after a while. So there was kind of like desire to split things. One, from the organizational perspective, that we can create clear ownerships to the teams, but also from the usability and user experience perspective, that we split our product into separate collaboration apps, and each of them is is solving a specific use case. For example, sharing documents, so we have a document management, or to communicate in real time, a kind of chat client, but also like task management between your team members and so on. So we're splitting on the one side the product itself, and then also assigned to each collaboration app that we extracted. We were assigning those apps to specific teams so that we could establish clear ownerships to the teams. And then as a consequence, so it was not a technical or technology-driven decision that we made. What it was driven by product and organizational circumstances that we then followed to to transform our monoliths into microservices so that we can have this clear ownership, this well-assigned responsibilities within the entire the system, only not from organizational or product perspective, but also from the software architecture as well. So that was the motivation that we have. So the motivation was to have well-defined teams, autonomous teams with well-defined responsibilities that can work on their collaboration apps independently with minimal impact across the teams, and develop and deploy their collaboration apps and deliver the features independently, and to deliver then the features faster to the customer. That was the motivation, going from monoliths to microservices.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I think I got the ownership question wrong earlier, or the thought. I think this is, I thought there were too many people that thought they are owning this, and therefore there's too much fight over who is doing it. But in your case, you actually explain that the reality in your case was that nobody really felt responsible. Therefore, it took too long to actually find the responsible person, and which is obviously worse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in real life, it happens also. So if you have, I don't know, a specific set of tasks and you have not clear ownerships, like you have a lot of people that are assigned to a set of tasks, it could be the case of it bears the risk that no one really takes a task or is responsible to taking the responsibility. That's kind of like very human reaction to that one. And so if the responsibilities or the ownerships are clearly defined, I would say it makes it easier, not only from the maintenance or to understand what this, for example, this microservice is doing, not only from the understanding perspective, but also from, okay, I own the services, so I am responsible from concepting it, but also from developing and deploying and delivering it to the customer.
Mm-hmm. Hey, is there a metric? I mean, I know we love metrics here when we talk about performance. Is there a metric that you were tracking that actually showed you that there's too much time wasted in pushing ownership and responsibility around? Meaning, too much time wasted in discussions on who should take it. Is there a metric that you can track? Is there something tangible? Maybe, I don't know, the time it takes to finally assign a ticket to a team, or is there anything you were tracking, and then a metric that you could see afterwards, after the migration being improved?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we not really we are not tracking every single person, because we trusted each other. But the thing is that, for example, the reaction times in terms of like not only assigning a ticket to yourself, but also the first reaction to the customer, that's something that I would say that decreased after we had clearly defined the ownerships, that the people now felt responsible. Okay, these are the tickets that are related to our team, and we are taking care of it immediately, so that the customer gets responses earlier than before.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. So, Susanne, I believe, if I read the bio correctly, and if I remember it correctly, so you were a CTO of a company that migrated from monolith to a microservice architecture, also moving the business to a SaaS business, correct?
Yeah, it's a SaaS solution. And it was originally a monolith and then transformed to microservices, but it has I would say that it has two challenges. That was one, the transformation from monolith to microservices, but the other one is that the SaaS solution, it's not only available on cloud, but also on premise. And this is something that I would highly recommend to reconsider the next time when you start this journey. If you have to deploy your product on premises, on the customer's infrastructure, it's really slowing you down, because you're not only, because you have to find the, how do you call it, the least denominator? Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah.
The correct word? Oh. Okay, so because you have to find the least denominator to find out what infrastructure you can support to establish automated delivery processes, like your pipeline that you set up. And it's not only one challenge is that the infrastructure and operational complexity that come with microservices itself, but on addition, having a solution that runs in the cloud, but also on premises, that's a real challenge. And I would highly recommend to reconsider if either you would like to follow it, because that's something where you make the most profit from. That's something that you're really reluctant to change it. That's one problem. But if you're going microservices path, I would recommend to consider what kind of complexities you have to deliver your software. And if you can rely on cloud native infrastructure, that is the best, from my perspective, the best infrastructure, and works pretty well. But as soon as you still have to deliver it on premises, because there you have to deploy it in one artifact, and you still have to negotiate with the customers downtimes and something, because they don't have the infrastructure that's usually available on your side. So it could be very challenging and to go this path. So the next time I would have more a focus on that. Okay, where do you have to deploy your services, and to figure out if you could shift the strategy. Okay, we are now a cloud SaaS solution only.
Yeah. I understand that, if it's possible, but I think if your customers demand otherwise, like in our case, Dynatrace, we actually deploy both, right? We deploy SaaS and on-premise, and we see it. Well, first of all, you're right. I mean, it's obviously a little more challenging to provide both deployment models, but we also see it as fulfilling a customer demand, because we have a lot of enterprise customers that needs to run our software on-premise. And in our case, we also see it as a competitive advantage. But I definitely agree with you. It's more challenging, right? If you can really just go SaaS only, it's the easier route.
Yeah. So if it's a user need which generates a competitive advantage, then it could be something that could belong to your core domain, because that's something that differentiating you from your competitors. And then that's something that you have to strategically invest into. That means that you operations DevOps has to be is something that you have to focus on as well, because to automate all the delivery pipeline is then very crucial. And for example, another client that I was working with, he has the same requirements to deliver their SaaS solution on top of Kubernetes clusters that are running on different cloud providers, such as Microsoft Azure or Amazon EKS. And so they also have a microservices architecture, but they are running on top of a Kubernetes cluster. So they are extracting away the cloud infrastructure beneath. So that's also possible. You still can run with microservices, but you have to invest more to make it to automate the infrastructure, to automate the delivery pipeline.
Yeah. So let me explain. This is actually an interesting topic, because we are currently developing an open source project. It's called Captain, to actually support exactly automated and continuous deployment and operations for Kubernetes environments, hybrid cloud environments, meaning wherever Kubernetes basically runs. Now, what we have learned, and I would be interested in your experience with your clients, while Kubernetes in theory is Kubernetes the same everywhere, in practical life, Kubernetes on one cloud vendor might not feel and taste the same as Kubernetes on other cloud vendor, or Kubernetes deployed on premise. And I'm not sure if you have seen this in your kind of quote unquote hybrid cloud Kubernetes environments, that there are subtle differences. Some of these differences are not as subtle. Some of them are actually bigger. But have you found that challenge as well? While Kubernetes sells us, it's just the same thing everywhere. It's actually not, and you have to account for that.
Yes, definitely. So it's also like how they provision the worker and the master nodes, for example, and on how you. It's all about the configuration, how you set up the nodes themselves. So sometimes in one cloud infrastructure, we were running smoothly, and with the same setup on another cloud infrastructure, we were running out of resources. And the question is like, okay, it's still, even though they say it's abstracting infrastructure away, that's true. But it comes with totally new primitives. And you can mess up with configuration. It could be totally, even though it's running on top of Kubernetes and taking care of orchestrating our containers, still has different impact on different cloud infrastructures. And so when I gave, for example, the talk about Wardley Maps, I was trying to make it visible what comes with microservices in terms of infrastructure and operational complexities, and also like, for example, if you're small teams with little DevOps practices in place, how can you still handle these infrastructure complexities that come with microservices and still deliver user and business value? And one option, so I was mapping out different options going from, for example, that you say infrastructure complexities are handled by mostly open source software, for example, Netflix OSS or Prometheus Grafana and so on. And then going to container orchestration such as Kubernetes, and from there to service mesh and then to serverless. So there was a kind of evolution of the value chain going through these different options. And when I was talking about Kubernetes, it's abstracting a lot of infrastructure components away, like service discovery, load balancing, centralized configuration management, scaling, recovery, and so on. But the other side is that it comes with new primitives. So it starts with that you have to configure pods, deployments, services, volumes, ingress, and then a lot more like stateful sets, secrets, config maps, cron jobs. So there are new primitives that come along and that you have to deal with. So while as a developer, for example, you don't have to deal with the infrastructure components that I've mentioned before, like service discovery and so on, but now you have to deal with new primitives and configuring them that come with Kubernetes, for example. And it makes it then, so there's kind of like trade-off between them. You get infrastructure components handled by the container orchestration, which is great, but it comes with new primitives that you have to configure now. So, and this has to be considered from the very beginning. And what does it mean then to your team? And so, it could be different in every cloud infrastructure.
Do you think this is the reason why we see, at least I think they're popular. If I talk with people, services like AWS offers Fargate, Google offers Cloud Run, and I'm pretty sure Azure, they also have their own version of, you just give me your container and I basically run it for you, and you don't need to worry about anything underneath. Basically, providing a managed service on top of Kubernetes and everything else. So just really allowing developers to focus on what they should really do, which is just providing containers, and then they take care of all the complexity underneath.
I guess that's the thing exactly, that all the primitives that come with container orchestration is then it's becoming invisible to us developers, and that we don't have to deal with anymore. And otherwise, I guess it takes a lot of time to take care of these infrastructure components, which is shifting our focus away from building our core domain, because our core domain, that's the one that is gives us competitive advantage, that's differentiating us from our competitors. That's where we are generating of fulfilling user needs, and which leads then to higher customer satisfaction. And if we have to deal all these infrastructure complexities, it's could bear the risk that we are focusing not on the elements or on the features that matters to our customers, but to parts of our software which is invisible to our customers. And if you're a small team and with little DevOps practices in place and you have to meet sharp timelines, you might end up with compromises on things that you should not compromise, and it could be a product that is not fulfilling your user needs and leading to unsatisfied customers in the worst case. So it's really important, it's very crucial that the infrastructure components are handled by someone else. And for example, but also, that's, if you can, for example, if you can go this way, like if you still use the work of unit, the container as a work of unit, but if you go the next step, the next evolution step is that you then can also can use the function, finer-grained short-lived function based on serverless technologies, for example. So because this one is then gives you the opportunity that your infrastructure is fully managed by someone else. You're offloading the infrastructure components to someone else. You're not taking care of them anymore. And instead, you only have your fine-grained functions that are triggered by a variety of events, and your code itself is then within the function that you implement, but also the building block that you're wiring together with the functions. For example, and DynamoDB. It's when I talk about, for example, AWS with AWS Lambda serverless technologies, then it allows you to focus on your core domain because you don't have to handle the infrastructure components anymore. But it also comes with constraints, so there's no silver bullet.
Mm-hmm. It feels like I think Brian and I have made that reference in the past, but if we're extracting everything back to the core, basically business value that it provides. So building a function and then interacting maybe with the database, and then somebody takes care of running it, and we get charged by the invocation, which in the classical serverless Lambda model it feels like we're back to the mainframe days where I've never been a mainframe developer, but you write your functions and then it runs on somebody else's hardware that they manage, and then it just gets charged by the MIPS, by the millions of instructions per second. It feels like we're moving, it feels at least, right? We're moving back into that model that has worked in the past, but now it just runs somewhere in the cloud and not on a big mainframe computer that you buy and that you basically rent and run in your own data center.
Yeah, so it releases the time, it frees time that you can use now more on building the functionality, the feature that matters to your customers, because you don't have to take care of the infrastructure components anymore. And also what it allows you that it's you only have to pay for execution. So when the function gets idle, it shuts down and costs nothing. So, but there's also downside to this. So it could also be, it's not always applicable to every case. But if you have, for example, a constant high load, it could be even more expensive than running on a Kubernetes cluster, for example. But I guess you also have to consider the total cost of ownership. Like it's, even though it could be more expensive on AWS, you still have to consider what cost could be caused by maintaining, provisioning it when you don't go serverless.
Yeah. I think this is also one of the, you mentioned it earlier, the term, your core domain, right? This is I think I like this a lot. And I looked through your slides, which by the way are excellent. So we'll put a link into the proceedings of the recording. The deck is called Preparing for a Future Microservices Journey with Wardley Maps. And I think also in this deck, you talk a lot about focusing on the core domain and then figuring out what you can kind of outsource, and can you give us maybe a little insights on how you would start kind of figuring out with a company what is their core domain versus what is not their core domain, so that they can figure out what to outsource and what to focus on? What's your typical approach here?
I guess it's a learning curve. So you don't when you start, it could be still it's an iterative process. So at first you start with identifying, for example, you start with your value chain. So, and a value chain is something. So behind every user need, there is a value chain. It starts with the question, who are your users? First, for example, I gave the example of a conference solution. The users of a conference solution could be the attendees, could be the speakers, but also conference organizers. And I was focusing on the attendees. They have the user need, for example, of the schedule management, or focused on the schedule, or focused on the speaker list, or focused on giving feedback or the ticketing itself. And behind every user need, there are components that are fulfilling these user needs either directly. So when they are fulfilling them directly, these are the components that the user are touching directly. And for example, you could have a schedule, speaker management, a session rating, or a survey and ticketing platform that the user is going to interact directly with. And then the next part of your value chain could be those components that are fulfilling not the user need directly, but that are facilitating other components in this value chain. So at first you identify all the components that are relevant to fulfilling the user needs, but could be fulfilling the user needs directly or indirectly by facilitating other components. For example, other components could be the data storage to store the states of the domain models of speaker management or schedule management, session rating, and so on. And it has less visibility to the user, so you place it a little bit further down in the value chain. It goes from top, visible, to low, and visible to the user. And then you go from top to down, what components are relevant. So then also you might need a search engine that facilitates schedule and speaker management. You would, for example, would like to search for speakers by name. Also, you could also, since you would like to communicate event-driven, you might need a message broker where you can, or the services can publish and subscribe messages to. And then it goes further down. Then you need an environment in which the software is executed, your compute platform, and this runs on top of a virtual machine. So you start first with the value chain from user to user needs to components that fulfill these user needs and other components that facilitate other components. And then you use this, after you have identified all the dependencies between those components and the position in the value chain, you use this value chain and plot it along the x-axis. That's called the Wardley Maps. So Wardley Maps is consisting of a y-axis, the value chain, and the x-axis, the evolution stages. And the evolution stages are going from left to right, from Genesis, custom build, product and rental, and commodities, going from left, the very new things that have never, brand new things that have never existed before, to custom build and product and rental, for example, off-the-shelf products and open source software, and commodity and utility on the far right. And you take this value chain and plot it along these axes, and trying to figure that allows you to figure out which component to build and how. So what components could be, what are components, the components and user need that belong to your core domain. So for example, in this conference solution, I would say that that survey and ticketing, but does not belong to your core domain. So these are very good candidates that you use, where you can use off-the-shelf products. So and then you do this with every component along your value chain, which could belong to the evolution stage of genesis of custom build, which would you like to build in-house, or where to use or buy off-the-shelf products or integrate open source software that goes to the product and rental evolution stage, or where to outsource to commodities or to utility suppliers that are those components that belong to the commodity evolution stage. And this allows you where to identify where to strategically invest most. That's custom build and genesis components, or where to outsource it to either using or buying off-the-shelf products or outsourcing it to utility suppliers. And I try to not only taking this value chain from this conference solution and plot it along the evolution axis, I was also trying to integrate the infrastructure complexities that come with microservices in terms of service discovery, load balancing, scaling, and so on, and centralized configuration management that come along with microservices. And I try to plot them along the evolution axis, trying to go through different stages from, okay, at first, the first draft could be, let's use as much open source software as possible and custom build a part of the failure handling, for example. That could be your first draft. Like, okay, you could use, for example, Netflix OSS and Spring Cloud that provides service discovery, load balancing, circuit breaker, and centralized configuration management. And then you can use Prometheus, Grafana, Zipkin, and the Elk Stack that helps us to provide observability with metrics gathering, monitoring, distributed tracing, and log aggregation, and so on. And then you look at those and think, oh, that's a lot to handle. It's still, we as developer has to take care. We have to integrate it, we have to implement it, we have to configure it. So it's a lot to handle. And how can we optimize it? And then, for example, you can identify those components that can be extracted away. For example, components that can be extracted away by integrating a container orchestration platform, for example. So, and then the next evolution stage could be, okay, now what happens when we use, for example, Kubernetes? What happens to these components? So they are becoming less visible to us as developers in the value chain itself, because they are moving a little bit further down. But as I mentioned before, for the Kubernetes cluster, we have to deal with new primitives like pod services, deployments, secrets, config maps, and so on. We have to configure those. And so that's a trade-off. Like, okay, we get the infrastructure components handled, but with a trade-off to that new primitives come along. And so, and it goes further and further. It's a very iterative process, and it's like continuous discussion between your team members, how you can evolve the technology stack of your components, and with a focus that you still can focus on your core domain, and that is differentiating you from your competitors, and offload those undifferentiating components by outsourcing it to utility suppliers. And at the end, I was then going from open source to Kubernetes to service mesh, and then to serverless, and to see how the components evolve along the value chain and within the Wardley Maps, how this could help you to visualize and to understand the benefits and the constraints, introducing the one or the other.
Hey, Susanne, I'm actually just, as you're talking, I have your presentation open here. And again, I can just encourage everyone, if you listen to this, re-listen again, check out the slides. They're all on SlideShare. And now, just so that I understand, and I think I understand it correctly, but all of these iterations, this is still all part of the Wardley Maps process. So I'm not sure what it's called, but it's all the planning process. So you start, and then you basically, in iterations, in planning mode, you're basically figuring out what is it really that you need to build, what type of technology do you really use, and which other things are you, let's say, offloading to a third party, right? It's all in the planning phase still.
Exactly.
I've never, to be honest with you, right? I mean, I've never heard about Wardley Maps before, but I look at your slide deck, makes a lot of sense. I did some I Googled, found the Wardley Maps. There's also some extremely good examples out there, but I really love yours because you have one consistent example that really explains the whole process. By the way, is there any recording of your presentation available, meaning a video recording that we should also, when people...
Yes, there are a few up already. So I gave the talk as a lightning talk, but it's a very short version that was at MicroCPH in Copenhagen, the Microservice Serverless Conference in Copenhagen. That was in May. And mid of May, then also 2 weeks in June, I did a talk at MuCon London. This video is already up. You only have to, I guess, register with Twitter or Facebook or whatever. But it's behind a login. I wanted, but it's accessible for everyone, but behind a login. And the next one was the Think About conference in Cologne. This video has also been recorded there. And soon I'm going to a conference in Paris, Death Break, and I guess they are recording their session as well. So there are a lot of recordings, hopefully available when the podcast is online.
Perfect, yeah. Awesome. Now, Susanne, is there, I think I kind of have my questions pretty much answered, the ones that I had in mind, because I think we started off with, what are the right questions to ask, why you want to move to microservices, some good and some bad examples you gave them as well. I really like the whole concept of building stuff in-house versus, outsource. The Wardley Maps is a great utility to use. We also talked about, which is a topic I had in mind for the end, but the responsibilities of microservices teams. I think you and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you say, try to abstract away the infrastructure. Don't focus on the infrastructure, but try really to focus on creating value, which is coding and leverage the new cloud services that we have that take away the complexity. But I guess it also depends, as you said, on the size of the company, because if you are a decent size, if you have services that are used heavily, then maybe it becomes more efficient, cost efficient to run parts of your infrastructure, in your own, on let's say parts of your applications on your own infrastructure, because it becomes more cost efficient. Is there any? Did I get this right? I know I summarized it a little bit, but does this make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I guess the main thing is because I have a computer science background, and I always love shiny new technology, but we always have to focus, is it really fulfilling the user needs of our customers? Is this really something that matters to our customers? I guess that's sometimes the question that we tend to forget to answer instead of like going for the next shiny new thing. So I guess it always makes sense to reconsider it, and that's also where Wardley Maps help a lot. Like, how can I evolve my technology stack, but still with a focus if this technology stack is still fulfilling the user needs.
Hey Brian, are you still with us? Actually, I see that. It seems we've been talking the whole time. What about you?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still here. This ended up being one more that I listened to or try to listen to. I think a lot of this was really, really informative, and I had a quick chance to look at the presentation beforehand, but it was little too much to try to consume or wrap my head around in the 15 minutes that I had. So I've just been listening and trying to absorb as much of this as I can, because it's really, really fascinating stuff. And I love the idea of calling some of the components utilities, because it is starting to mature into that realm. So I think that's really
exactly. So there is every component is that's what Wardley Maps says. So Simon Water, that's a researcher from the UK who has created this technique, and he says that every component is evolving from left to right. So and there's no choice over evolution. So you continuously have to adapt, otherwise you get overtaken by your competitors, for example. And I really like this idea that also like that the efficiency enables innovation. That means that the industrialization of one component enables you to innovate others in terms of, for example, that new features of an existing product can appear, or that another component can co-evolve, or, for example, that new components can emerge, and it's the genesis of new component that then enables new user needs that have not existed before. So it frees new ideas, new innovations. So the industrialization of one component or the evolution of one component enables the innovation of others. And it's a kind of like ecosystem where everything is moving and evolving, and nothing stands still, and you continuously have to adapt. That's really challenging on the one side, but also very exciting on the other side. So, and also, I'm sorry for being so big both. So that's the reason why I, when I give a presentation, I always scribble my slides. I don't know if you look at my slides.
Those are hand drawn.
They are all hand drawn.
That's awesome. I love that.
And with Linux, by the way, with my clumsy mouse, I don't have an idle library. I created it all manually. And usually, when I talk about something, I love to present it with my slides, because they are piling up so they are only little icons with labels attached to it, so that everyone could follow. Because I'm doing this because I picture myself sitting in the audience, and I guess I have the shortest attention span on the Northern Hemisphere, I would say, because usually when I'm sitting in a conference talk, I have to apologize, but what is he or she talking about again? So it's really, and so, okay, you have to stay focused. I am trying to cheat myself in terms of like, okay, slide by slide, only one icon, and it piles up with only icons and labels and no so much text on it. So I'm sorry, I would love to give the podcast with slides aside that you can watch while I'm talking.
Yeah, it would be cool, but then I guess it wouldn't be a podcast.
That's true.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say was I think you said this, but if not, I'm going to put the words in your mouth about how all of these decisions that you make really are to the point of allowing the business to most efficiently and effectively serve the user, right? And that's what it really comes back to. And you mentioned early on in the beginning of the podcast how, if you could go back again, you probably wouldn't do the on-prem thing. Whereas, as Andy mentioned, we kind of have to have the on-prem thing, but that's because of our users, right? Our users, we have some financial users, some government users and all that, where there has to be that on-prem thing. So just even using that as an example, it's really about knowing what your customers are, who your customers are, and who you're going after, finding out what it is they're going to need. Because if you're servicing an area where they're not going to need an on-prem version, then as you said, don't bog yourself down with it. That's just as you go, like technical debt or business debt that you're going to be adding into this to have a feature that might not be to the business advantage and more so not to the user advantage. But if it is, that's where, then definitely put it in. And the challenge we see with so many customers and just organizations out there is, hey, there's all these shiny new technologies and we want to jump on them. Well, okay, well, what's your justification, right? And what's it look like, and how much is it going to cost you? And if you do roll your own version where you're going to have to own and maintain it, how much does that cost versus a product that you might have a little less control over? But then how much does it cost to maintain the premium? There's a lot of moving levers in terms of cost, efficiency, and everything that really have to be thought out really well before you really commit. Or you can experiment and modify as you go, but it's not just, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this, right? Andy, I think if you remember way back when we had, I forget his name, but the guy from Fender with the Fender apps, and they did it and it worked for them, but their whole thing was like, we want to build a serverless app, right? So it was a phone app that would go back, and everything that the phone interacted with was serverless. But it worked in that case. They thought it out. They made it work, right? So it just goes to show you really have to think about these things.
Yeah. So, yeah. For example, for one client, I was developing a solution solely based on serverless technologies, and it worked out pretty well. It was a backend API, and it was so. I totally understand going this path, and because it was meeting the user values, we have to be online very quickly, it helped me because, and I was at that point, it was just a prototype at that point, but it helped me a lot because I didn't have to take care of the infrastructure. I don't have to set up a Kubernetes cluster, or I don't have to. It's just my functions, and the thing is, even though if you go serverless, what still applies is a domain. So I am from the domain-driven design field, or from that area. So you can apply it based on microservices, but also based on serverless technologies, and it still applies there as well. And it's that it helps you to not to lose sight of your functions, which functions belong to which bounded context, where your domain model is, and it's really helpful to that some things are remaining the same, even though that's another technology that you're using underneath.
Excellent. Hey, Andy, did you sort of summarize before, but was that your summarizing, or do you have another?
Let's wrap it up, and I think I have a couple of things I want to add to what I said earlier.
Come on, do it.
All right. So first of all, Susanne, thank you so much for being on the show. I think you are covering a problem, or you have a lot of expertise by solving a problem that a lot of enterprise customers, or a lot of enterprise companies, but also startups, are facing. Trying to figure out, are microservices the right thing? What type of granularity, and how do we approach it? I have to say, one of the biggest takeaways is the stuff with the ownership that I mentioned earlier. So whenever you think about going microservices, think about, first of all, does it benefit us? Does it solve the ownership problem? So do we have better and clearer ownerships later on, which allows me to scale also better from an organizational perspective? I think that's a key thing. I would really like to see a metric that we can look at to say we actually currently have an ownership problem because, for instance, it takes too long until somebody reacts to a problem. That's one of the metrics you said. How long does it take for us to react to a customer inquiry, a problem, a bug, right? And the longer this takes, it means we potentially have an ownership issue. I really also like the way that it said, even though it doesn't work for our case at Dynatrace, but if you have the choice to go both on-premise and SaaS, there's obviously challenges with going on-premise, but like in our case, if it is a core domain, if it is a value proposition, if it's a competitive advantage, then this is something to consider. Always focus on your core domain. I really like your presentation about the Wardley Maps. I really encourage everyone to check out the slides, to listen and watch the recordings. Really beautiful hand drawings. It's amazing how much effort you put in to these slides. And as you said, I may not have as short of an attention span as you have when watching presentations, but clearly when I was sitting in your presentation, it was very refreshing, especially because your presentations, your slides are just different. And that's why I think that also kept me engaged and caused me to invite you, because it was just the whole package was extremely good and delivered a lot of value for me. So thank you for that.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure and an honor participating in this podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. One quick last thing. Do you have, thinking about the August, September, or fall, going into fall timeframe, will you be having any speaking engagements currently that you know of?
I am going to I have to look it up. So I have in September, I might have 2, and then in November, I have 2 as well. So yes.
If there's anybody interested in following you, are you on Twitter, I imagine? What would your Twitter handle be, or some other way they can follow along with you?
Yes, so my Twitter handle, I guess that's the shortest and the easiest to remember. It's SUKSR. It's 5 letters.
SUKSR? Wow.
Exactly.
Nice and short. Wow. All right, awesome. So I'm sure you'd have announcements of where you're going to be on Twitter.
Yes, I will do announce it. So the problem is I'm right now in the middle of a very intense conference season, and I forgot where I'm going to be in the next couple of months. So I'm every week in a different country, and I forget what country do I have to go now. So it's really like confusing right now. So I have to, but I will announce it on Twitter definitely.
Awesome. All right. Well, as Andy said, thank you. It was an honor to have you on as well. Thank you very much for being on today. If anybody has any questions or topics, ideas for the podcast, you can tweet us at pure_DT, or you can send an email to pureperformance@dynatrace.com. Thank you very much. I'll try to pronounce it like Andy. Susanne?
Susanne, exactly. Yeah, great.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.